as we're talking about relationships and stuff, because you're here and you're the expert, there are some things, Jonathan and I work a lot with people who are depressed and have anxiety and stuff like that. And we notice that there are relational issues within that too. And what are some of the issues that you find come up in things with depression and anxiety?
Yeah, I think the biggest challenge when somebody that you care and love about is struggling with depression and anxiety is we tend to start reeling ourselves, right? Because we don't really know what to do at the end of the day. I just see this person that I love and care about. And by the way, the more you care, the harder this is.
Yes.
Okay. The more I really care about you and I see you struggling and not able to get out of bed, or you're becoming irrational with your anxiety, the more I, as your supporter, your parent, your lover, become more and more out of control myself. And it usually is because of this idea that somehow I need to fix you. I need to do this work for you. And it's my responsibility to help that happen. And this kind of goes way back in regards to the premise that we step into relationships on that's a little bit debunked in the first place, where we step to the altar and say, I'm going to make you happy. Will you make me happy too? And we go, yes, I'm in. Are you in? I'm in. Right. And so there's this reeling story that's actually a lie, that I'm going to make you happy if we're in love and we're meant to be together, when that's not a reality at all at the end of the day.
Every single one of those little fantasy movies that we watch, the happily ever after.
Yeah. I don't know. We all buy into that story though. And it's almost like, I know for me, the more I felt like I was messing up my relationship life, the more I adhered to the story, that there was like this framework and these principles that I was going to have to start checking the boxes, right, in order to be successful. So I must need to like be perfect myself, or I'm finding the wrong person, because there's this narrative that says if I found the right person, or I'm the perfect person, or I'm in the right place, this is supposed to go really well. So what does it mean in my relationship then, when the person that I love more than anyone in the whole wide world is breaking down and struggling? It must mean that I didn't do something right.
Yeah.
And we take that on personally, right? And that's where the whole thing starts to like really skid sideways, because, right, there's two people that are now a hot mess that are not really knowing or sure what to do. And everybody's taking it on emotionally. And so I become a byproduct of the anxiety or the depression that my person is struggling with.
So just out of curiosity, if the inappropriate narrative would be to come into a relationship and have the perception that the result of it should be to make you happy, if that's the wrong approach to have, then what would be the sort of correct understanding in regards to the hope that you get from your relationships?
The happiness has to come from yourself. You're the only person that can make you happy. We don't make anybody else happy. And certainly what I do and how I show up in my life affects other people. But when I start taking on the emotional well-being of someone outside of myself, I'm going to lose the management of my own personal emotional well-being. And now we're going to all be in a hot mess. So one of the things that we feel guilty about when we're supporting somebody that's going through a difficult time mentally and emotionally is we, again, try and fix it. So I'm going to try and point out all the places that they're doing it wrong. Now, here's the thing, listeners, they get that. They know what they're doing wrong. Nobody knows better than they do. There's this wonderful saying that says, you can't hurt me. That's my job. Because I got all the intel. I got all the goods. I know how I'm spinning it, right? I know what the true intention is. I know. That's what I'm having a difficult time with. So as a supporter, if we start pointing out all the places, parts, and pieces that they're doing it wrong, right? When are you going to pull it together is a really common one. When are we going to be done with this? When is this going to be over? Why can't you just be happy? These are common things that we say in our efforts to try and support and encourage them without realizing actually that just kind of cements what they already know is true. I really am broken. I really am a hot mess. I really can't pull it together. When? I have no idea. Right. But I do know that the more we have this conversation, the worse I feel. So what do we do then if we're in a support role for somebody who's struggling? What they need to hear is that you're there for them. Right. What they need to hear is that they have their answers. And as soon as they're ready to tell you how to support them, you're here ready to stand by their side and do just that.
What if they don't know how you should best be able to support them. I know with a lot of patients with depression or anxiety, they're coming to us as professionals because they don't know. They don't know what is going to be best for them. And then for them to be able to transfer that information to a partner or, a child or a parent or whatever it might be, right?
Any significant other.
Significant other in their life, it's a difficult conversation to have. So what are some tips that you would suggest in that regard, for them to come to that clarity, so to speak?
Yeah, I love that. And I think the first thing that we just need to come clean about is I really don't know how to support you. I don't really know what to do, so that you don't panic and that you can, with inside of your own personal integrity, tell the truth. I don't know how to, let's get some help. And then the support comes from those that are surrounding them as a community that help them identify what it is they need in order to be supported, right? If it comes any other way, if I'm telling you what to do to get over your depression or your anxiety, you're just going to pull away and shut down from me anyway, because you know that that's not what you necessarily need. The only person that's going to know what they need is the person who's going through it. And we as professionals get to help them uncover what that is. And the people that support them in their family are standing by to implement and help them with that. Right. So I really learned this big personally in my own life when I have a daughter that I love so much that struggles with bipolar. And I can't tell you how many times her mom said, when are you going to start doing this? You remember what the doctor said. You're supposed to do it like this. And now you're not taking your meds. And oh my gosh, we have to go. When are we going to be done with this? Right? I was saying those things. And it wasn't until what I realized she needed to hear from me is, I believe in your ability to figure this out for yourself. I love you. I'm here for you. I'm cheering you on. I don't know what to do, but I love you and I'm here for you. And let's go talk to so-and-so and I'll go with you. We'll do this together. I can only imagine this is scary, right? That's how we play the supportive role in saying, hey, let's go for a walk, or let's go see this person. Come on, I'll go with you. Or let's go for a drive and forget all about this for, 30 minutes. It doesn't have to consume our life. And those are the parts and pieces that we forget as everybody's starting to panic, not knowing what to do.
I think something that you just said too reminded me that I think I heard this. One of the things that people need to hear the most is that there's hope. And the interesting thing about this is maybe the one area that we all feel inadequate about in terms of being the expert. Like, I never assume that I'm supposed to know how my car works. I take it to the mechanic. But somehow when somebody in my life might be experiencing depression or anxiety, suddenly I feel like I have to know the answers to it and everything. But even just saying, hey, a lot of people experience depression or anxiety. There are experts that know how to deal with this. Let's go ask them what we can do. I know there's an answer somewhere. We just have to figure out what that answer is. And even if we don't know what it is, there are people who can help us with that. And I'll go with you to see that person.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Could we maybe walk through a very specific scenario? And I think you gave one in the self-disclosure that you just gave. So let's just assume that you, as a parent and having a patient, or having, not a patient, a child that is supposed to be taking prescription medication, and they're being reluctant to do so. Or what would be an appropriate way to approach that situation to where you're not overly being critical of them maybe not taking the medication that would otherwise be helpful for them, but on the flip side, not overly supporting them in the things that they don't want to do that in the long term are also going to be unhelpful for the situation?
My favorite question, if we ever get stuck, go here. Help me understand. Help me understand what's going on for you and why you're resistant to take your medication. That way I can be there with you. A question that's sincerely asked is always an invitation in instead of a condemnation for not doing that thing that we all know you should be doing. There's an emotional undertow that correlates with how I show up. In the emotional world, we show up as good as we feel, don't we? So if I'm not feeling so great emotionally, if there's some resistance there in my emotional body, then my physical demonstration or how I show up in my life is going to be the result of the emotional reflection of that. So if somebody's not taking their medication, for example, there's something going on emotionally that we want to uncover. And if I say, why aren't you taking your medication? They're going to go, you know what? Up
Yeah.
yours. You don't
Yeah.
even know. You can't even relate. You're not even going to sit down and be with me long enough to understand where I'm coming from. But if I were to say, help me understand where you're at, right? Let's forget about the medication. Why don't you want to take it? Help me understand what's going on there.
It sounds like, if we could break that down, your response being very empathetic, but then also, phrasing in a way of asking questions, right? To kind of dig at the root cause of it.
Yeah. Because if once they feel like they're heard, right? And that's something that I would love to gift the audience today, if I could, a simple framework that will kind of bring this all together, called fairy dust. We call it fairy dust because you'll remember it. We could do it all the clinical terms and names, but if I say fairy dust, you'll remember it. But yes, absolutely. If somebody is going to feel condemned or shamed or belittled or criticized or minimized for what it is they're wrestling with emotionally, I mean, just think, all of us human beings pull away, shut down. We're not motivated to do the things that we know we need to do if I'm feeling criticized, belittled, minimized, shamed, guilty. Look, I know I'm not taking my medication. There's nobody who's going to know that better than me. But what we're not uncovering is what's the emotional undertow as to why I don't want to take the medication. And taking this back to my daughter, bipolars are classic for not taking their medication. Oh, I can't even tell you how many rounds and rounds of conversations we had about, oh my gosh, I'm checking, right? And there's like 3 weeks worth of pills in here. Come on, man, what are you doing? Right? No wonder. And then you start going, oh, no wonder you did that. It's all starting to make sense to me. Totally missing the boat. It wasn't until I would say, help me understand what's going on. And she would say, mania, Mom, is a really great place to be. And you know what? The letdown after that really sucks. Mm-hmm. And I don't know how to manage and balance the space between being here in reality and missing my mania. Wow, that was like huge for me. It wasn't about the medication at all. It was about her own emotional struggle within her own day-to-day emotional experience that she was wrestling with. And she didn't want to take the medication because she didn't want to feel normal. It was much more enjoyable for her to be in the creative zone of writing her songs and singing her music, right? And feeling bigger than life than it was for her to just make sure she ate her vegetables and got to work on time. Mm-hmm. Okay. Now, the wonderful thing about our imagination is when she learned to take herself to places of imagination on her medication, she realized that she could live in both places. Mm-hmm. That there were times where I could take myself in my own mind's eye into that place of imagination and fantasy, but really I don't want to be there all the time because it really compromises me on the other side of life. And so it's this delicate balance of managing and finding balance within inside of ourselves emotionally, isn't it? Mm-hmm. And physically, how do we show up in our physical bodies and in our physical lives? And how do we navigate and manage these emotional bodies that we have that are invisible? They're lightning fast, right? And they fluctuate and change on a dime. And they can also, the darn things, time travel, right? Which is sometimes not necessarily where we want to go. But we have to often remember that time travel is also the things that help us remember the good times too, right? Mm-hmm. And so it's this human experience that we all embark on as being a human beings, where we get to find the balance within inside of ourselves. And so that conversation with her about why weren't you taking your meds, help me understand, was a game changer for helping her understand exactly how to find balance within inside of ourselves, physically and emotionally.
Can we go into that fairy dust framework that you were describing, just so that our listeners can get their better understanding of what that framework is, so that maybe the conversation isn't going to be particularly relevant with this medication conversation that we just had, but that they can use that framework in order to address whatever conversation they need to have.
Yeah. If there was ever a fairy dust for relationships, this is it. And it's based on the psychological premise of the 3 basic things we need as a human being. Number 1, we all want to feel heard, right? You don't have to agree with me, but if you get me, if I feel like you get me, that you hear what I have to say, it's a game changer for me. There's a lot of things that I can let go at that point in time. Number 2, I want to know that I'm appreciated. Let's be honest, relationships with ourselves and with each other, they take a gosh darn lot of work, okay? There's a lot of effort, right? And money and time and resources that are put into creating great relationships. It's a great place of investment, but if I'm not feeling like I'm acknowledged and appreciated for all that I'm doing, I tend to not want to do it anymore, right? We can say that about relationships, work, a lot of other things. And the third principle is, at the end of the day, our deepest, darkest fear, as I see it, is that I don't matter, that who I am doesn't matter, right? That I don't matter to you in this relationship, that what we're doing, what we've created or are in the process of creating doesn't matter. And so those are really the 3 biggies. So understanding that, it really gives us a huge leg up when it comes to knowing how to navigate our relationships. And simply put, at any old time, for any old reason, under any old circumstances, I can relate to or use fairy dust to help me navigate through anything. And in the communication frameworks that I teach to my clients and in workshops is fairy dust is always the beginning and the end of any conversation, especially if it's going to be difficult. So I would say something like, this is a version of fairy dust. Hey, before we have this conversation, I just want you to know that I really appreciate you and you matter to me in this relationship. And at the end of the day, I really want you to feel heard. Okay. Mm-hmm. And this is really hard for me. So here I go. That's fairy dust. We could be in the middle of a fight, right? And things are escalating and I'm like, pulling my hair out. And before I reach over the table to choke you, I'm going to say, you know what? I'm impassioned about this because I really care about you. I care about this relationship, right? The thing is the more emotionally charged we are, the more we care. And we forget that. I feel this way because I care. And so if we can remember that in a moment, to just sprinkle a little fairy dust instead of say a bunch of things that I don't mean and do a bunch of things that I don't really want to regret later, I can just, and I've said this mad. Oh, I'm so mad right now. And I want you to know I love you. I love you. Give me 5 minutes. I'm going to come back to this, right? It's better to sprinkle some fairy dust than it is to allow that to continue. Okay. And of course, I can just say it for any reason at all. Hey, I just want you to know, I love you. You matter to me today. Come back home. I can't wait to kiss you again,
So the 3 key things, just to summarize, make sure everybody heard that, is fairy dust equals being heard, being appreciated, and knowing that we matter. Those are the 3 things that you can sprinkle on any relationship issue, even in the crux of a difficult one.
Is the suggestion that when you use the fairy dust technique that you're trying to incorporate all 3 every time? Or is it one or the other, just kind of depending on the context of the situation?
We all could use all 3, right? But if you can just remember one, hey, I just want you to know you matter to me, that this relationship matters to me, that this is important to me. I mean, I'm sure you can realize what a game changer that is if I'm stepping in to say, and you know what? You just bounced another check. And what are we supposed to help me understand how we're going to clean this up? Okay. It's a game changer. It's the difference between getting all defensive as I step into a conversation or creating a safe place where we can begin the conversation. That's really difficult.
So I can imagine a lot of people saying, well, that sounds great, but in the midst of a heated conversation, it's extremely difficult to do. So what are some tips or techniques or practices or exercises that you might do with your clients to help them get to the point where they can actually feel like they have the capacity to do the fairy dust?
Yeah, here it is. The number one thing you can do when things are escalating, and we all know when we're starting to turn into a hot mess, we just don't know how to stop it. Mm-hmm. Right? I do. There's this signal that goes off where it's like, okay, now that's it. Right? There's this place where we go, okay, we're crossing over now. This is going up. At that point in time, my best advice to you is pause, stop. And it sounds easy, but it's really hard. That's the beginning of a framework that I teach called emotional weightlifting. The majority of us as human beings, we're very, very weak when it comes to our emotional bodies because we don't know how to stop. We just let that emotional ride that's escalating take us to places we don't want to go without realizing we're in charge. And so as we develop emotional strength and capability there, the best thing for you to practice, and it's going to be so hard, it's going to make your armpits sweaty and you're going to think, oh, I can't do it. I can't do it. I can't. Yes, you can. Do it. And then pause and come back to it. Then you could step in with some fairy dust. And if you get good at this, as my clients do, you'll get to a point where you can stop and pause in real time and pull out fairy dust in nanoseconds. But you have to have the ability and the emotional capacity and strength to stop yourself.
Thanks for listening. To hear more episodes, find us on social media, or support us financially, visit thebrainpeoplepodcast.com.